All right, welcome everyone. It's my favorite time of the year. And no, it's not Christmas, but it's the time when farmers start texting and emailing me pictures of beautiful fields of small grain crops from all over the Midwest. And it's a cool time of year too, because there's a really stark difference that we can see between the corn and soybean plants that are barely boot high and the waving, thriving fields of rye and oats and wheat that are out there that are flowering or even starting to fill grain heads. And our host today, Martin Larson, is just one of the farmers who has been texting me pictures of his small grains, and we're excited to share some of those with you all today. As I was saying, I'm Alicia Bauer with Practical Farmers of Iowa, and accompanying me behind the scenes is Rebecca Clay. If you are tuning in on Facebook, please open up that comment box and type in your name and where you're tuning in from so we can get more of that field day feel and kind of get to know who is out there in the audience. So today we're broadcasting live from Martin Larson's farm in Olmsted County, Minnesota, and we're going to be learning about no-till and interseeding equipment, food-grade oat production, and rye cover crop seed production. This event is a partnership between Practical Farmers of Iowa and our partner, the Land Stewardship Project. Shona Snader is on site in Minnesota with Martin and is going to be introducing herself in just a minute after I go through a couple more slides. So we have one sponsor of this event, that is BioTill. So BioTill cover crops have consistently been the forefront of the cover crop market, and our family of professional sales staff remain committed to helping you achieve higher returns through more productive soils. So thanks very much to BioTill for sponsoring this field day event. We also have a number of sponsors who put up some funds and support for our entire field day series. These are the level A sponsors that make this work possible. And then we also have a number of level B sponsors who again are supporting kind of the entire PFI field day season of over 60 virtual field day events that we're planning for this summer. So who we are, Practical Farmers of Iowa is a farmer-to-farmer member organization. We go where the farmers tell us to go. And we achieve our mission by helping farmers to build resilient farms and communities by connecting farmers with other farmers to share knowledge so you can make successful changes that promote stewardship and profitability on your farms. We also offer many specific programming opportunities around small grain crops like oats and rye that we're going to talk about in this event today, including a cost share program that's accessible for farmers in Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, depending on where you're tuning in from, as well as some targeted e-newsletters that provide small grain production resources timely to what's going on in the field. So I've included the specific link, practicalfarmers.org/small grains, where you can learn more about the small grains programs that we offer at PFI. So today, we're gonna, after we get through our introductions here, Martin is gonna take us on a tour from his oat field, and we're gonna see some of his no-till equipment and also sharing some pre-recorded photos and video from planting this season and his rye field that he raises for cover crop seed as well. So as we're going along, we're going to be monitoring the Facebook feed and monitoring comments. So if a question occurs to you that you want to ask Martin, please type that in the comment box, shoot it off anytime as we're going along, and we're going to be monitoring that and then feeding those comments back to Martin so that he can answer your questions. At the end, we'll also ask you for some feedback on how this event went. So we'll ask you we'll pop a link in the comment box right now, and then again, after we're done with the field day. And if you could take a minute, click on that link, provide us some feedback on how the event went. We do read every single one of those and use them to make our programming better and more tuned into what you want to hear about. So that's enough about PFI. I'm going to turn it over to Shona to talk about Land Stewardship Project.
All right. First off, I just want to say thank you to Alicia and Rebecca from PFI. It's been really wonderful to work with you. This is the first time that I've organized an event with PFI, and it's really been quite fun. All this digital stuff is brand new for our organization, so thank you for putting up as we're kind of struggling through this. again, my name is Shona Snader. I work at the Land Stewardship Project. I work out of the Lewiston office, and I am a co-director along with Doug Nopar of the Bridge to Soil Health program. So similarly to PFI, our mission is at the Land Stewardship Project is to foster an ethic of stewardship for farmland. We promote sustainable agriculture and develop healthy communities. And we do this through our many programs that we have and the diverse work we take on at LSP. I work in the soil health program. We also have a farm beginnings program. So that's education for beginning farmers to get started on their own farms. We do farm transitions. We have a policy and organizing program that works on developing better policies for farming, whether that's the federal farm bill or state policy. And we also take on things like racial justice. We really believe that our small rural communities need to be diverse in many ways to be healthy and sustainable. So a little bit more about our soil health program. We have a motto that whether you farm conventionally or organic, we all have room to improve on soil health. This is a very unifying message for both organic and conventional farmers to come together and learn from one another. You know, we can all be rebuilding our soils, sequestering carbon back into the soil. And so it's a great opportunity to get a diverse mix of farmers together to talk about how we can do that through these different practices. We also have a Soil Builders Network. So this is our farmer-to-farmer networking and information sharing platform. It is a free program to sign up for. When you sign up, you will receive our newsletter that we send out every 2 months. We send out flyers on events that are coming up, and we also share resources that local farmers develop around practices that they're using, whether it's roller crimping or planting a crop of oats, cover crops, no-till, anything like that. It's really a way of building community among farmers around these practices. And there is a link right there. You can always go to our website and go under the Soil Builders tab and sign up for that on the webpage there as well. So I am going to mute myself and then turn it over here, I think, to Martin, if that's right. Thank you.
Yeah, that sounds right. So let's dig in and hear more about oats and rye. All right. I am not able to hear you, Martin. I think we might have a microphone on mute.
How's this?
Wonderful. Perfect.
Okay. So here we go again. We're not exactly new to Zoom calls. You know, working in offices, we have more Zoom meetings, and it really is amazing how much we can do remotely. And I think that this is an example of that. But it certainly doesn't come without hiccups right here with mute. That's, I think, the most common thing I have heard in the last 2 to 3 months now. You're on mute, you're on mute. So here I fall victim to it. But pretty amazing that, you know, we're out here standing at the farm, having a virtual field day where everyone can attend. And a little bit about myself. Depending on which family you want to go with, I'm between a 5th and generation farmer. The 7th generation, my son Rudy is running around out in the field. He's outstanding in the field. This is actually my uncle's home place. So this is where he's farmed for the last 30 years and actually close to 40 years now, 35 years. And I rent this from him. He retired, and it's been a really good working opportunity and to work with him. And the succession between him and I has been really fun. And my uncle is as close to me as my own father is. So a little bit of history about why I wanted to grow oats. You know, we go back to 2013. It's a marker year for everyone. And that was the start of my cover crop and no-till experience. And then we fast forward to today, and I've only enhanced that cover cropping and no-tilling. At first, I was as nervous as anyone is who starts something new in agriculture. And now, as I get more comfortable with it, I'm doing more. I'm enhancing it. But I still, I've always said I wanted that third crop in rotation. I wanted extended rotation, but where is it? And I interacted with practical farmers of Iowa in little bits, and they come out with their cost share program and said, that's it. I'm going to do it. Corn is cheap. It's hard to get anything going with the market right now. I have a lot invested in the corn crop, so I want to try some oats. So how do you try oats? Well, in the past years, we do 5 to 7 acres for the cattle and for some feed, but it wasn't like 50 acres or 100 acres. So I could draw on what we knew or what I know about raising little bits of oats and just apply it to more. But I didn't want to do the tillage. I wanted to stay no-till, and obviously wanted to increase the amount that I grew of oats. And the experience with rye for no-till rye for seed production is growing also. I do a lot of cover crops with rye, and my neighbors do. So it just was kind of a natural event that the neighbors and I started working together to get rye seed in the neighborhood. Now remember about seed laws. I always want to throw that disclaimer in there. We don't want to be marketing something that's not in line with our seed laws. But when we work together with neighbors and barter, we're working with those seed laws. If you were to market it outside of your farm and actually receive money for that seed, really encourage you to work with the Department of Ag and do that properly. So oats, I guess that's why we're here for the most part. And I guess so. We're standing. This field right here is 20 acres. There's 3 fields on this farm. You'll see it in the drone footage later on. This was no-tilled starting on April 7th, and I finished up around April 9th of this year. And let's back up to those days, and let's look at our last years that we've had in farming in Southeast Minnesota. And I was really concerned about the number of working days we were going to have and the field conditions and what was going to happen to those field conditions. We just assumed that they were going to be wet and our window to plant it was going to be really small. So some friends of mine have the no-till drill. They bought it. We're working together to use it and to get all of this work done, from the combining to the harvesting. So that I said, I think we should go. Conditions aren't ideal, but we got to get that cover crop, or we got to get that old crop in the ground. So it was wet, and it was we were barely able to use that drill, but we were getting them in the ground. We were getting soil cover over them. We weren't mudding up the drill terribly, but still we were getting that mud to stick to the wheels. And actually on the morning of the 9th and into the evening of the 9th, we were actually working on a little bit of frost to get this done, which worked out here on the bean stubble, but because these oats were planted into bean stubble, but we went to corn stalks, we were having some issues, and I want to talk about that a little bit more. But bean stubble really is the place for oats for no-tilling in the spring. The other field that I have is corn stalks, but they were removed in the fall for bedding. So it was next to, the residue was limited, and we were able to get good stands there. But anywhere we had corn stalks, it really, this drill struggled to push through them. There is some mobility if you use like a Kinsey planter and you get that set up right, you can get the stalks out of the way and get it planted. But I'd really be cautious on those corn stalks. It's not impossible, but there's a few more challenges. We're in this bean stubble. Rudy rode with me. We worked till 10 o'clock that night and got this field in, and it went great. And it's been fun to watch them grow up and be really pretty now, in a new way. I mean, it's I love to look at crops and I love to scout crops, but this oats has been definitely fun. So I don't know if we want to show some of the video here now. It might be a good time to bring that video in, and I can talk about this planting out here, and then what else I did to try to take care of these oats and treat them as a crop. I think that was very important to me that we treat these as a crop. We get the high-end, high-quality oat. So this picture that you're seeing here now, that's at Great Plains Drill, owned by the neighbors, some friends of mine. It's a 20-foot drill. Here we are, April 7th, over on the other field. It's got the coulter cart out in front. You can adjust those coulter depths. And well, I guess I'm seeing the video. So okay. So yeah, there we are. There's the coulter cart out in front. You can adjust the depth of those coulters. So if you go too deep, you're going to be bringing up more wet soil. You're going to be rolling up these wheels in the back. If you go too shallow, we were finding that we weren't balanced and not keeping it in the ground. So this is following the planting. I seeded the clover, the cover crop clover, at 5 pounds. So the picture that's up that I see now, of course, there's my dog. She's got to hang out in the cab with me most of the time. That's the corner of my seeding bar. And I weigh the seed out of one port and travel 1 acre. And I have 9 ports on the seeder. So 1/9 of an acre, and you go with what weight you need for 1/9 of an acre. The next is the video of seeding, putting that clover down. So granted, it was a second pass, but because the Great Plains drill didn't have grass seed boxes on it, and I wanted that accurate seeding of the clover, I opted to do it on this second pass. But I was able to move right along at 10 miles an hour. And as you can see later in the photos, the clover took on really good. And actually, that's one of the more exciting things about this cover crop following the oats, is that clover is going to be there for that clover is going to be there for the corn crop next year. So okay, we're just balancing the technicalities of being in the field here. So I hope this is looking the same to you guys as it is to me. Okay, so May 2nd, let's go to May 2nd. So clover was seeded early, a couple days after I planted the oats. Then I had to get into the field for corn and soybeans. So I got all of the corn planted in April this year. It went very well. And that little bit of opportunity, or that window between the corn planting and the soybean planting, I went out and I put the fertilizer down of that 30-30-30 blend on May 2nd. So why did I wait? Well, a variety of reasons, but most of it was I wanted them up. I wanted it ready to take up the fertilizer right away instead of that fertilizer laying there. So that 30-30-30 blend is the recommended rate across the board. If you really do have higher fertility in your farms due to manure, you can pull that out, because you don't want to over fertilize these oats and make a bunch of vegetation, get them up real tall, and then they lodge in an August storm or the like, or July-August storm or the like. So on corn stalks, that was still the blend that I used. You probably could have bumped that nitrogen rate up a little bit, but I wasn't willing to get 2 blends. So that, I mean, in the future, I don't foresee changing the need for that at all. Here you are on May 19th. That's the photo that's up for me. And you can see that the oats are up that 6-8 inches tall. The clover is definitely visible, and that excitement grew for me. And then May 19th, I was done with planting soybeans. Well into spring, I spray all my own crops, so spraying the corn and the soybeans, burning it down, and in between there, I got the sprayer cleaned out. Can't emphasize that enough about sprayer clean out when you go into your oats and put the fungicide application down. So this was my first fungicide application on May 31st. Had I to do it over again without any inhibitions, I would have done this first pass maybe 3 to 4 days sooner. I don't think that I was terribly late, but I do feel that 3 to 4 days sooner would have been better than that May 31st. And then I followed up with a second application on June 9th. So really we're only looking at about 10 days after the first, but that was when that flag leaf was out, and the fungicide application, that's what you're looking for, is to protect that flag leaf. So, here we are, June 24th, and we're at full head. Actually, the milk is in there, so we're starting to fill the pods. It's wonderful that we're cooled off. We still got sun, we got plenty of moisture. 2 passes of fungicide down. This is when you're really building your test weight for harvest. If we were to have hot, blaring, I would say hot, like 90-degree, dry, blowing wind, that test weight is going to suffer come harvest. You can see here, if I walk out into the field just a little bit, I don't know if they'll switch over to me in the field. But here's, we're only thigh high with these oats, and that's actually, that's actually where I would prefer them. Yes, I know it's diminishing your straw yield, but the straw you are going to get is going to be extremely high quality and fine, because we don't have these super tall oats, and they're not apt to blow down in a windstorm, because that can definitely happen right now.
Martin, I kind of have a related question for you that came in through the comment box on what variety of oats are those that are standing so short?
Yeah, so I never actually hit on that. The first 40 feet in this field is Reins, R-E-I-N-S, and then the rest of this field is Saddle. So you can still see the color difference in them, and maybe you can see that a little bit from the high resolution drone footage. But when they were younger, it almost looked like you had 2 different fertilizer applications out here because of the color difference. That those saddle oats were much lighter colored than here. And to the untrained eye, you would have said that's a nitrogen deficiency. But it was, all it was a varietal change. So they're about the same height. The saddle, they get a little bit taller, or they're a little bit taller out here, but they're very close to the same height.
And one more related question was, what was the seeding rate for those oats?
So this is 3 bushel across the board. 3 bushel. And that, I didn't weigh it coming out of the drill like I did with the clover cover crop. We did it off the acre counter and just got started with some bags and did a few acres and refined our rate, and then dumped in the bulk bags into the drill and just went after it. So, I mean, it was maybe a few pounds off a 3 bushel, but that's what we had. One thing I would do different in no-till at the beginning of the season when we plant these, there's no opportunity to do any weed control up front. And I would have sprayed this in the fall for dandelions because they didn't go away come spring. And I can still find them out here if you look in the understory. But last year, particularly on the other field where we have a hay strip right there, the hay was so thin and poor from the weather conditions that we had that it gave an opportunity for the dandelions to get a hold and seed that neighboring field down. And they were in the oats and they're still in there. And I'm sure on that field, there's areas that if we were to go in the thickest dandelion areas, it would have thinned the oats. But you know, as far as like seeding rate, it's in that recommended seeding rate for grain, and as long as they come up uniform, which these did, they actually got snow on them. We had about 4 to 6 inches of snow on these, which heard it before. I'm sure you guys have too. You know, snow is the poor man's fertilizer. I don't think it hurt these. It didn't hurt these oats at all to get that snow on them. So I think, you know, we can go into that drone footage. You know, here we are at milk stage. It's looking at harvest is probably 3 weeks away at a minimum. Here's the clover and the understory just a couple weeks ago. Again, really excited about that, and end credit that can give the corn for the next year. There's my doggo again. This was Sunday night. We were over at the other field looking at things. I had to really just emphasize, you know, when you do something different and you're nervous about it and it starts to look great, it just the whole family, my dad, my uncle, and everyone is really on board with the oats, which is it's really nice to see. So here's kind of the aerial view of the farm, the woodland here to the north. So we're standing off to the left of the screen there where the cars are. This drone footage was taken a couple days ago. So it was recent, and you can see that this farm is like any other farm in Olmsted County. It's got its mix of soils. These ridge tops are pretty good, but you get in the valleys and there's some wet areas. You can see that in the crop. It still needs a little tile. You know, you could triple the amount of tile out here and it wouldn't hurt anything. These wet spots showed up a little bit in the oats. You know, when you're selecting fields to plant for oats in the spring, or I would back that up to in the previous year, you know, that you remember you're going to be out there really early. So get consistent soil type fields the best you can. Stay away from wet fields or fields with wet spots, because you're going to want to be out there and doing something early. On the other hand, small grains, the interruption mid-year in the cropping cycle, maybe it would give you an opportunity midsummer when the tilers don't have as much to do to get out and get some tile in. And that's exactly what we're going to do down below here for where I'm standing, is get a little more tile in this summer when these oats come off, and actually, you know, maybe get a great stabilization structure along the woodlands where we're getting a lot of water runoff going down into the woods. So that's, you know, right now what I'm looking at on the drone video, as you see, you know, the farmstead with the cattle in it up in the pasture. That's that other field that was planted on corn stalks with the stalks removed for bedding, and then that hay strip in the middle of it, and then that angle looking back at the other field where we are. So here we are this week yet too. One thing I'd say about like straw, and as we approach harvest here, and that's certifying the straw. If you choose to sell and market your straw, that there is some additional value in certifying your straw weed free, and that's what I've done or in the process of doing. And my neighbors and partnering farmers that we're working together, they're also working in the certification process. We happen to be doing that through MCIA, Minnesota Crop Improvement Association, but I know there's other entities that'll do that certification process for you. That's just the one that I chose. Doesn't mean that it's any better or worse. In this photo of the understory, I believe this was part of the video where it's paused off to the left. You can see one of those dandelions. And actually, I have not sprayed this with any herbicide. I don't know if that question was going to come up. It was discussed. I hit some outside edges where there were some Canadian thistle to get them knocked out. I sprayed them with 2,4-D early, but as far as whole field, it was not. So one thing I consider about weeds is what species they are, how many are out here, because they would interfere with your combining. These will be combined straight, so they'll be cut right off and fed into the combine. Obviously, anything green and tough, like a very large giant ragweed patch, is going to go through that combine pretty tough, and then that's going to be in your straw as well. So those are things that I would be out scouting for earlier rather than later, because there is a limit to how long you can spray 2,4-D. MCPA is the other product that's recommended for oats and small grains, and that it does what I would say ding the clover in the history of using it, and what I've seen it used for years ago with my family is it'll ding your underseeding. It won't kill it, where 2,4-D is probably going to kill it. So that MCPA is another option to use for weed control. On the rye side of,
one question that came in on the clover underseeding there. What varieties of clover was that you planted?
Yes, yep. So that was a medium red clover, and it's about 5 pounds. Some of it was actually seeded a little over 5 pounds, closer to 6, and some of it was a little under at 4. You can't really see where that happened or where I made the change. So it all looks that clover all looks pretty good. And and when you combine, and hitting on combining, in my experience, when you combine straight, or even when you swath them and pick them back up, you got to wait for the conditions to be right. Don't try to push it, because you're going to wrap up things on your combine that turn, and pretty much everything on the combine turns. So it can wrap up anywhere, and I've done it and I've dug it out. So whether it's straight or out of the windrow, you really got to let that straw die down. When you're combining, as far as combine settings, I happen to run a gleaner. It's what I grew up with. Now I have a rotary gleaner. I turn up the air a little bit more than maybe I would if I was combining them strictly for feed, to blow what we call the thins out, or the lights out the back. So there's the combine in rye last year. So blowing those thins out the back isn't all bad, because you are seeding down that little bit of a cover crop in the fall. So if you do have cattle, you need the feed for it. This clover dries really hard. Some don't prefer it for feed, but it's not all bad feed. If you had that oatlage mixed in with it, it actually makes pretty good feed. Certainly for some dry cows, some beef cattle, or the like. Here on the rye side of things, rye is significantly taller. The rye that we have right now in the neighborhood is as tall as I am, and I'm 5'7". So you got 5 foot tall rye out there. You're going to have to cut high, and likely cut it a second time, because you're never going to get that to feed through the combine. But the straw is valuable. You want to get as much as you can. Disc bines work pretty good to go back through when you have the straw that the combine laid on the ground. That disc bine can kind of gather it all up and cut shorter, and then you can get more straw. Because when you combine straight, that's not going to be dry enough to bale right out of the back of the combine. As opposed to if it's swath, it's going to be dry enough to combine that right out of the back. So it's going to have to lay there for a little bit and dry down before you can bale it. So that's just things to keep in mind. The more straw you have, obviously, the longer it's going to take to dry down. This spine stem straw that we have in the shorter oats That's not going to take as long. You're probably going to be able to rake a few windrows together. Be cautious with raking. It tends to fluff out the bottom of the rake. If you're like me, you got an older side rake, you might lose some. So it may be advantageous to just bale faster and bale it right out of what the windrow of the combine laid down. And that's another thing. If you have, I run a smaller head on my combine. You could easily run a 20-foot on it, but I run a 15-foot. And there was nothing wrong with that in combining in tough conditions in the rye, particularly last year on the first day that I was combining. That you're running less through. You go out with a 40-foot draper head. It's going to be tough in Minnesota to do that. Dakotas is a different story, but here we just don't have the drying days, and you don't want to risk it and have a storm come in and blow it all down when it's that close to harvest. So kind of still going into this rye a little more on rye seed production, or rye for seed or grain production. Really, the windows of opportunity to get it seeded in Minnesota and northern Iowa is early season soybeans. So 08 soybeans never really scared me to go that early. And actually this year I have some 04s. So they're really going to come off early, and that'll give you the opportunity to get out with a grain drill and seed it in. If you're going to take it to seed or grain on that rye, you should drill it in, as opposed to, all of my cover crops are broadcasted and not incorporated. So there's a difference there in seed to soil contact and just doing because you want to treat it like a high value crop that it is. And coming into the spring, if you seed that rye at 2 bushel, you're going to have a very thick cover. The more it grows in the fall, the better it's going to be in the spring. The thicker it's going to be in the spring, the better looking it's going to be, and the better weed control it's going to be. So, is there any other questions here now?
Yeah, another
Alicia?
question came in. How many applications of fungicide did you do? And I'm not sure if
2.
that's okay. And that was just oats, right?
That was on the oats. Yep. I haven't, nor have my neighbors applied fungicide to the rye. On the oats, I used a product called Caramba. It was labeled for oats at 10 ounces. So I did 2 applications at 10 ounces. But that second one, the timing on that has to be as near as perfect as we can make it, and that's at flag leaf. Because that's the part of the plant that we want to protect. And that if we want to look at the flag leaf, hopefully this video is high enough quality that we can see the flag leaf right here. But when this comes out and we can see this, that's when you need to apply that fungicide as soon as possible. And again, sprayer clean out. Can't emphasize it enough that you will kill your entire oat crop if you don't focus on that sprayer clean out when you go from soybeans or corn into the oats. Another question?
Yeah. So I had a question. You mentioned that you did the certified weed-free straw. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the price that you get for the certified versus sort of regular straw markets in your area, and any costs?
Yeah, I guess we're still feeling that out. I don't have a good answer for that, other than if you're going to grow it for straw, you should certify it, because it opens up more markets for you. We have and had a pipeline that's been getting laid through our area. It went through my farm, natural gas pipeline. And that's just an example of a type of project that needs a lot of straw for mulch. And they're going to need certified straw, because they can't be held liable for moving around noxious weeds. So there's an example of a market that would not exist for you if you didn't certify your straw. So I can't speak to values very good right now, but anecdotally, and you know, it's gonna open up more markets for you. And those are top end buyers. Like if you get, you know, the pipeline per se, they're top end buyers. They need straw, they need a lot of it, and they need it in a certain time frame on site. So
Another question that came in from the Facebook comments is, did you run over the oats with a cultipacker?
I did not. Nope. So and that's something we can go back and look at, but that Great Plains drill had a wheel for the furrow closer, and it did a pretty good job. It ridged it up a little bit, but then so 2 days later, then I come back with the interseeder, which has rolling Lilliston units on it, and I actually took the biggest log chain that I have and looped it around the back of the interseeder, or this seeder, and that actually did a very good job crumbling down that soil surface. If I had a cultipacker or just the packing roller, as opposed to like the cultipacker, which had the cultivation in between the two rollers, I would have rolled it had I had one. I just don't have one. If you're not going to run over it with something after the drill, like, so say, you know, some drills have harrow teeth in the back, a harrow in the back, and I think that would be excellent. If you don't have anything behind the drill, put that log chain behind the drill, and I think, you know, the bigger the log chain, the better. And if you don't have that, then if you have the roller, roll it. If you don't, talk to the neighbors, right? So there's lots of options, but I think it's just good insurance from, you know, my visual of what that soil surface looked like after planting. You know, to do just a little bit of, I would call it the shakedown on the soil surface. I know Angela here, just out in the field, said that there's questions regarding N credit on the clover, and N credit, I assume, on the corn crop following, or on the oats. I guess I wouldn't credit it to this year's oat crop. I wouldn't do that. For next year's corn crop, I am actually I gave the Minnesota Department of Ag, a local employee here that works with nitrogen crediting on corn, a heads up that I wanted to do some strips and that we could design some N test rate strips for the corn next year, because it is a big question. I want to give it all the value that I can get. I want to credit it to maximum, yet I don't want to short myself on nitrogen for the corn, obviously. So it could be with, you know, setting up different rates of applied N, and following up with a preseason, early season nitrate test for side dressing. And then, you know, postseason, you could have the basal stock nitrate test, or, you know, do fall nitrate testing. So any other questions here at this point, Alicia?
Yeah, another one that came in is, what do you put down for fertilizer on the rye being grown for seed? Is that same as your oats or different?
So you can put down that same blend and it's not going to hurt a bit. Of course, a lot of it, you know, has to do with rye. When you're taking it to seed again too, it's like you don't want to get it too tall. But you know, I use that same blend on my rye, and it's still 5 feet tall. So if you know, guys that take it for feed, you can fertilize it pretty aggressively. But for seed, I would still be cautious, because you know, rye can get so tall, and we don't want to feed it so much that it lodges. And I know less. I mean, I guess my emphasis has been on these oats, and I know less about varieties of rye, and there may be some varietal differences, and that would be maybe something to look more into, because when you look at when I look at rye, for me, it's going to be for cover crop seed, which doesn't mean that it's an ugly stepchild. It's just that this right here, what I'm standing behind, is going to food. So it's going to come off this field and it's going to go to a mill and become food. So I guess in my mind, I'm looking at it in a couple of different, in two different ways. So yeah, that fertilizing for rye, that 30, 30, 30, 30, keep it simple, something like that. And I don't see a problem with that at all. If you have really high fertility and history of manure, you don't need to fertilize it at all.
Great.
Other questions?
Yeah, so I've got a question for you, because you are taking your rye for cover crop seed, kind of germination is going to be your key performance metric on that rye. And I know that there have been concerns lately about, germination on rye grown in Minnesota, Iowa, kind of our Corn Belt area. Can you talk a little bit about what kinds of germ you've gotten off of your rye seed and how you test that?
So last year, and I know, Alicia, up front when you and I were talking, that you had brought this to my attention about last year in germ testing on the rye, and that it was a struggle to get good germ tests. And so I'll just speak to last year. And so worked with the neighbors, and the neighbor grew 30 acres of rye, and I went out prior to harvest and I gathered up a bunch of heads and I hand shelled it and I put it into a napkin test, if ever anyone's familiar with that, where you keep that napkin wet and you let it germinate and then you count what germinates. So simply put, you got 100 seeds, 90 of them germinate, you got 90% germination rate. Now, if you were on the line, like somewhere, now if I didn't see that, that's an easy test to do. If I didn't see that, you can send those samples in to get analyzed. And it's a follow-up question, like where do I send that to get it sampled? That's a follow-up question because I can't recall right here on the spot. But last year, we were definitely, close to that 90% germination, 85 to 90%. And of this seed that I used and took, and of the neighbors that have used it, it was an excellent germinator in the fall when we put it down. The last seeding I did was October 23rd last fall, and that was laid on top, and it was there this spring. At the time that it was killed off, it was a foot tall. And even coming back this spring when I was doing some frost seeding, I used up what I had left, and even that came out and turned out real well to hold it through the winter and use it this spring as a frost seed.
Great. Well, one question from Jennifer Cruz on Facebook is, what variety of rye did you seed?
And that's the variety question that I honestly can't answer that. That was labeled as a VNS rye when it was bought. So that's going to make seed dealers cringe, and it should. There's a reason that it should. And I can't emphasize enough, when you are purchasing rye, you have to buy labeled seed, and you have to when you buy labeled seed, there's certain standards that are met. So when you buy from reputable dealers, those standards are met. So on this VNS rye, I think it was a labeling thing when it passed through Canada, but this is a cringeworthy statement that I just said today, but it's the warning shot for when you buy rye seed. Don't just, know what you're doing if you do go to the neighbor and it's labeled, or don't buy it if it's not labeled, because that's not legal in the state of Minnesota.
Great. It's always some good reminders, and we have some great blog resources at practicalfarmers.org about navigating some of these, sort of legal rules around seed production, if you want to check those out.
Yes, I can't emphasize that enough, to fire that warning shot that you gotta be cautious.
So one more question that's come in through Facebook is, what is your target yield on oats?
So the last time I grew oats was 2 seasons ago. And actually, if we're so 2 years ago I grew oats, and they're right across the lane from me, right to the west. And you can actually see to the line in the cornfield from the drone footage where they were. So if you have time and you can go back and you can look at this field right to the west of me, you'll see it to the line. And that I didn't do anything special to those oats. That year that we planted them, I did them. My uncle helped. We did it together. We used the conventional drill, did light tillage, put them in. That was it. We walked away from them. No fertilizer, no fungicide, and they yielded 80 bushel. So it makes me really excited about this. That I'd like to certainly hit 100 bushel. We haven't done that in a long time. But that's my target yield, and just looking out here, I think they can hit that. I think they're consistent enough. The other fields, probably won't quite get to that 100 bushel, but it certainly should be over 80. Just anecdotally looking at comparing the last 2 years. So remember, when we do our economic models of these small grains, and what's enticing to me is that we don't. So this field right next to me would have been corn this year. So you're giving something up, right? So you could have grown corn, but you're going to grow oats. So you have less investment in the old crop right up front. And you're comparing, okay, what am I going to grow for yield? I have a little bit of cost share dollars. But also remember that oat crop will give you other values. And of course, there's the soil health benefit. But now let's look at, okay, now it's going to be 2021 when I grow corn here, and nitrogen crediting. So if we get 20 pounds extra nitrogen than what we would have had we grown corn on soybeans, so that has value. Are we going to outperform on yield because we have an extended rotation? So is it going to do 5 bushel better, 3 or 2 or 10? Well, that's due to the oat crop, and soybeans really benefit from extended rotations, and that's due to the oat crop. So when we look at this oat, the financials of oats, look ahead and look at the whole systems approach. So ideally, in my future, I'd like to see at least 3, if not 4 years between every soybean rotation and corn rotation. Right now I'm corn, soybeans. That I'd really like to push that out there, because we bring in that systems approach into it, and as a whole, the economics of your farm are better. I'm doing more of the work alone. My dad, my uncle are getting older, so I'm doing it alone. I'm restricted on time. I have a son. I actually have a job. I like to go caving. And everybody that knows that works with me, not one vacation time day has been taken in the last 5 years to actually go on vacation. It's been to come out here and work. Well, eventually I'd like that to change too. So that spreading out of work, that this is work that doesn't get done here in the fall now when we're really pushed for time. It's work that gets done in July, August, etc. Maybe, I don't want to go too long, because there was one thing I wanted to hit for sure, and that's I'm a conservationist at heart. I have been for quite some time now. And as we see our climate changing and weather changing, and no one watches the weather like farmers do. And, farmers can be found, staring at that radar the night of a storm, looking out the window, what's going to happen. And that climate and that scarring of the farm and the landscape really troubled me. So it really pushed me to change farming, the way that I farmed. And, you know, then I started to look at the other benefits of conservation, and that included water quality. So as a cave enthusiast and a karst enthusiast, I could get underneath these ag lands and see what kind of water quality was coming below them and how we could do a better job at managing up here, being profitable, but also the water underneath. And I think this slide that Alicia just put up really illustrates that. And so I'm standing we're actually standing within maybe 40, 50 feet of the tile line that's underneath the oats field directly north of me, and it ends before it gets up here into the soybean field. So when you look at this chart, and charts can be busy, I just want to be simple. That yellow line, which fits, that was this soybean field that was planted to oats. We didn't have a cover crop on it after it was soybean, so it went right from the soybean crop to the oat crop. You know, and looking at the tile sampling, so it says this tile water sampling and nitrate concentration within that tile water. You know, we're well under 6 most of the time. It's funny because we did actually pick up that little bit of fertilizer application. In my opinion, it showed up in that tile water in late May. But look at this corn above it. That's the highest one. And, you know, we started pretty close to one another, and that cornfield is actually just northwest of me. As we're standing here about 1,000 feet, that tile system is all underneath that cornfield. So we started out very similar, and that cornfield has gone up above 12, up into the 13 here in the, I guess it would be the first part of June, and drop back a little bit to 10 here on the 18th, but it's certainly been up there high. The bottom 2 lines, you know, were these interseeded corn and soybean crops, and that cover crop was able to really hold that nitrate concentration down. So just a slide about other things that are that I'm passionate about, and that I care about, and reasons why I'm doing this. So I don't know, I think we're kind of winding down on time. I don't know if there's any other questions.
Yeah, I think we've kind of reached the end of the hour here. So thank you so much, Martin, for sharing with us all that, you know, great information. I think that that tile monitoring was really compelling, as well as, you know, the way you think about the financials in the extended rotation and the whole system benefits. So that kind of wraps things up for today. As I think that Becca popped into that Facebook comment box, that link again, so that you can fill out an evaluation about how this field day went today, this virtual field day. And again, we do read every single one of those and use it to shape our programming going forward. So we mean it when we say we're farmer led, and that we want to make that programming good for, you know, what you're interested in. So, and there will be a perk that will be drawing a couple of evaluation responses out of a hat to send some aluminum water bottles throughout the summer as kind of a little raffle prize perk if you do go ahead and fill out that evaluation. So thanks again to Martin, thanks to the sponsor of this field day, BioTill, and to our partner, Land Stewardship Project. It's been a great day, and hope you all get to enjoy the sunshine.